Hi, and welcome to Itasca Waters. This is the third in a series of programs we will be airing on ICTV, all on the general subject of shorelands in Itasca County. I'm your host, Brian Whittemore. This program is made possible by the nonprofit organization Itasca Waters and by the financial support of the Blandin Foundation. My guest is Heather Baird, who is a forest fisheries landscape coordinator for the DNR. Heather started with the DNR in 2000 as a fisheries specialist in Waterville, moved to Brainerd in 2006, and worked as an aquatic habitat specialist for the Shoreline Habitat Program, and now works on landscape protection efforts in northern Minnesota. She is, among other things, an expert on shoreland protection, buffer zones, and natural shorelines. Heather has bachelor's and master's degrees in natural resources and fisheries biology from Cornell University. So Heather, thank you very much for taking the time on this, when we're taping it, beautiful day.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Come up here. Let's talk, I kind of gave an overview, a bio of your positions, but let's talk about your work a little bit before we get into shoreline.
Sure. So yeah, I started with the Minnesota DNR in 2000 as a fisheries specialist down in Waterville, so that's between Faribault and Mankato. And I was there on the prairie lakes that, there's not a lot of prairie left down there anymore. And after I've picked my 10,000 bullhead out of a net, I'm thinking, these are bigger issues. I look around at the landscape and you think, these are a lot bigger issues than what I can solve here in a boat picking my nets every day. So I got a sense back then that I wanted to look at broader, bigger landscape issues with the department.
So you're working primarily on shorelines?
I work at actually watershed scales now with the forestry issues, but I did a lot for about 10 or 12 years. We had a shoreline program. We actually funded some grants, and I did a lot of work on that. And I still continue to work with soil and water conservation districts and local lake associations to help with technical aspects of shoreline work.
Well, let's talk about shorelines then.
Sure.
So just to define exactly what we're talking about, we had a compadre of yours, Paul Radomski.
Yes.
Who was here last time, and he talked about the aquatic zone.
Yep.
The littoral zone, zone in front of the shoreline. And today we're going to talk about the shoreline itself. So let me ask you, what makes for a healthy shoreline?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of aspects to a healthy shoreline. I'd say the biggest thing is no erosion or very little erosion. So even on natural shorelines where we're talking about fully vegetated shorelines with natural vegetation, trees, shrubs, plants, you can have some erosion. You look at areas on a lake that's undeveloped and you can see areas where maybe a tree had tipped up and there's some soil exposed. So there's a little bit of erosion there. But when we add the people aspect of it is when we start to get more, people tend to like to tidy things up, or they remove the trees, or they take that down tree that maybe would be wave protection and remove it from the water. And so then we're adding to what would cause erosion on shorelines. So and then people, of course, then we put rock in to try to patch the work, and before we know it, we've just got to riprap it all. So a healthy shoreline really is a shoreline that's got native vegetation, it's got trees and shrubs. Even in the prairie areas of the state, they were always rung with trees and shrubs. So really keeping that native vegetation intact and having minimal erosion.
And conversely, what makes for an unhealthy shoreline?
Sure. There's, and there's varying states of both of those, but I would say exposed soil, where we have almost no native vegetation. Probably the worst situations I see is where people have, taken out every strip of native vegetation, trees and shrubs, and you've got a manicured lawn to the edge that people fertilize intensively to keep it green, especially up here in the sandy parts of the state. And then we put a lot of boulders and riprap. The worst case of that is when the boulders start to slip down with the ice heaves, and then you see that black plastic that the contractors like to lay behind it. And so you've got exposed soil, you've got no vegetation that's native that's left, and then you've got these rocks that are this mishap along the shoreline. That's probably the worst case.
So people, let's say in our case, Itasca County, primarily second homeowners would come up from the cities, or they'd retire up here, as we did.
Yep.
And they think, let's take the practices from home, beautiful lawn that I get to take care of, and bring it up north and change the up north landscape and make it into a beautiful lawn. And DNR Itasca Waters, don't mess with us. This is our property.
That's right.
Do you run into that ever?
I do. And I think mainly, I've had less issues where people, say, well, I'm not going to change my practice. It's more that people just aren't aware of what they're doing. They see, especially in the metro area, there's a lot of detention ponds and retaining ponds that, that catch the stormwater. And what are those? They're usually mowed lawn with rock riprap. With a lot of geese, especially this time of year. And so people look at that and they think, oh, well, that's kind of what they know is the natural state of water, right? Or lakes or ponds. But I think it's more of an education thing, and people either haven't had the time or they do what they know best, right? And what they knew best in the city was fertilize my lawn, maintain it, keep it watered, that sort of thing. So it's really just changing that mindset once people move north and move to the lakes.
And it's a leading question, but has the DNR given any thought to how to educate people and change minds?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I've heard people say it takes generations to change, mindsets. But we've had a shoreline program for years where we actually funded projects, and we were really trying to get outreach going. We still have a pretty good spot on our website that links you to the Restore Your Shore. It used to be a CD-ROM, and now it's a web-based application. And then also trying to really work with partners like lake associations and soil and water conservation districts to get the word out. But I think it's going to take a while.
So you would go to, get this right, mndnr.org?
Yep.
And then you go to Restore Your Shore?
Yes. You can even just, in the Google search engine, you can just type in Restore Your Shore, and it'll pop it up.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you can also reach it, I might add, through itascawaters.org.
Oh, great.
We use a lot of the DNR resources in our resource site. So it's good. I'm interested in what you just said about it's not really attitudes as much about knowledge.
Right.
And I find that pretty encouraging, because there is a matter of, with AIS and with a lot of other practices, septic, is people just don't want to be interfered with on their property. And I think especially true in the, if such a thing is true, the up north philosophy about how to live and everything. So it is positive to me that people do apparently react positively when you give them knowledge, give them information.
Right. Yeah, down in Brainerd, Gull Lake, when I first started 15 years ago, I had a lake association person come and say, oh, I'd love to get shoreline restoration on Gull Lake. Well, you're talking, people who maybe are there a week out of the year. And so for years they didn't have, they were trying to do the program but didn't have any takers. And now GCOLA, Gull Chain of Lakes Association, funds their own, and they've been getting people to do projects. So, I think it's, again, just putting the word out, kind of giving people the knowledge, and then they can figure out how they can apply that on their property.
Yeah, and as we tape this on May 30th?
31st?
31st? Oh my gosh, time flies. There actually is a Shoreland Advisors meeting in a couple of hours where Itasca Waters has launched a program of training local people to be available a couple of times a year to go out at request of homeowners to look at their property, just neighbor to neighbor.
Yep.
That's all it is. They might bring along copies of this, which is our Shoreland Advisors guide we put together, or go on our website. But that's the kind of thing I think you're talking about.
Yes, that's excellent too, and really the neighbor to neighbor, because I did a project up here a long time ago on Sugar Lake, or Sissabaquet, and we had the project installed. It was looking great. It was starting to mature. And it took the adjacent neighbor 8 years to see what was going on in his neighbor's property to actually install it on his own. And so, but it, and it was neighbor to neighbor talking, and I never really approached them saying you should do this, or look at how great this is. It was just the two neighbors talking and getting the experience, and so yeah, I think a lot of people don't want to call government to ask for advice, but if their neighbor says, oh, I've done even just a small chunk, and this I can show you what I've done, even if it's 10, 15 feet. And then you can expand on it. I think that's great. That's really the way to get the word out.
So let's back up a little bit. You talked about runoff and the physical problem of erosion, but it represents other things. One of the problems with having clean water is that dirty water can look clean.
Yes.
You look at a lake and it doesn't necessarily show you what's bad things that are in it. So if you can talk as a scientist for a minute, what kind of pollutants
Sure.
go into your average lake that people may not be aware that they're responsible for.
Right, right. So as a fisheries person, we tend to look at mostly sediment, which people can see, So those near shore spawners, your bluegills and your bass and stuff, they're spawning right in the near shore area. So if you've got any sort of wave action that's pulling out sand or sediment and burying the eggs, especially when they're laying there incubating, that's detrimental to the fisheries. Also doesn't help at all with the pollution side of it. So you can see the sediment being carried in, but with that sediment is also phosphorus and nitrogen and other things that might be put on your lawn for your fertilizers or Roundup or anything that you might have had to kill the dandelions. And so I think physically we can see sediment, but there's other things that run in, especially phosphorus. You don't really think about it. You put fertilizer on your lawn and then maybe you get a heavy rain 4 or 5 hours later. Well, some of that goes into the ground and some of that maybe is taken up by the plants, but a lot of it actually runs in the water and you don't see that. You get up the next morning and the water is just as clear as when you went to bed, right? But it's that over time and the accumulation of those nutrients in the water that really makes a difference. So.
And phosphorus, as I understand it, occurs naturally as well. It's not just fertilizer, right?
Yes, it does.
So, in the woods.
Yep, so even the Boundary Waters lakes, which everyone thinks of as pristine, has, phosphorus in them. It's just a natural process. It's when we accelerate that process as humans just by living on the lakes or adding fertilizer that really can change how quickly lakes go to algae blooms or change their systems from clear water state to algae blooms.
Yeah, I've also read, especially recently, that Minnesota waterways have been found to contain such interesting items as cocaine and other medicines that people take that they have prescriptions for. How does that get in the water? I mean, that just blew my mind.
Yeah, I know. So, we ingest some of that, right? No matter what you're taking, acetaminophen or whatever, that you might take an Advil before you go to bed. But we process a lot of it, but then we use the bathroom, and that waste from ours goes to the sewage treatment plants, and most of those sewage treatment plants dump somewhere. I know in Brainerd it goes to the Mississippi River. So, the river could have anything, any prescription drug that someone's ingesting, we could find potentially in the water downstream. And so, it's pretty small, but when you add population centers and those items kind of grow, you think of the size of the city of Minneapolis and all those prescription drugs people are taking, and then it goes in the waterway. So yeah, again, another thing we really don't think about, but.
Yeah, it's just crazy. In an area like Itasca County, most people, if not everyone, has septic systems. Right. But it's the same process?
Yes, so it's the same process. Those go into a holding tank, and you only have those holding tanks pumped every once in a while. And, it eventually, will seep through or, eventually gets into the groundwater, hopefully gets cleared out before it actually reaches the lake. It filters out and but yeah, there's ways that those things can get into the lakes as well. So I think the main thing with septics is having them pumped regularly. You think, well, I don't have to. There's a mandate I pump it every 10 years or, have an inspection every so often. I think, as a homeowner, you want to do that more often, and that would really help the water quality.
And I want to throw in a plug against Kleenex because we just had ours pumped. And we just plain didn't realize, and we do pay attention, that Kleenex is bad. We were a day away from a plug up. So that was good timing on our part, but that practice has now stopped. Well, let's talk about what homeowners can actually do, and let's spend some time doing that. And,
sure.
Let's pick a homeowner, second or first home that lives in Itasca County, lives on a lake or a river, or on the Mississippi or someplace, and they have a lawn, a yard that they keep, and they're proud of it. It's beautiful. But that phosphorus is going in, that acetaminophen is going in. Just don't realize it. So what do folks do who are watching this, listening to you, and say, oh my gosh, that's kind of describes me. So start from the beginning. Again, how they would go about gaining knowledge and then practicing the knowledge they gain.
Yeah, I'd say, to start, it's like anything. You don't want to just dive into it, right? If you were going to build a house, you weren't going to just go buy lumber without your blueprints. So, you want to do your homework. You'd want to do some web research. Restore the Shore is a great place to start. Anything on the Itasca Waters website would be great. They've been doing a great job with University of Minnesota Extension. And the Soil and Water Conservation District, they do a great job. They've been doing this for years as well. So get your knowledge, read up, and then the actual diving into a project can be as easy as, a lot of places up here, they haven't laid sod mats down when they've built new houses. If it's a brand new house, that might be an exception. But a lot of times, the native vegetation has kind of slowly been converted to a lawn. Sometimes you can just stop mowing, like a little strip by the water, and see what comes. You'd be surprised. You may just be mowing native vegetation or native sedges. And if you just turn your mower off and let things come in, that's an excellent way to get started. If you can do that and have someone who's done a project or a county representative come and look at it just to see what's there. I've done that with people, and sometimes I don't find anything, and I just have to say, I think you're going to have to either seed or plant plugs here or trees or shrubs. But it doesn't cost anything to just turn the mower off and try that. So that's a great place to start. If you've got active erosion, meaning...
And just to interrupt just for a second, and you don't have to, you're not talking about the whole lawn, you're talking about the edge of the lake.
Yep, and even, say you own 100 linear feet of shoreline, you could just take, a 10-foot strip in one corner if that's what you wanted, and just say, okay, I'm going to stop mowing this 10 by 10 area and see what comes, and just experiment. So that's a really easy solution.
Okay, and you were talking, I think, about erosion.
Yeah, so if you have active erosion, where your bank is actually slumping, you're seeing sand, you're seeing the shoreline actually fall in, I would say, get someone out there to kind of look at it, get some advice on what to do. There's a lot of natural products you can use. We've done stuff just as you take a bunch of twigs or brush bundles and you wrap them up with some twine and you can shove them in, and what you really want to do is just break up that wave energy. The wave energy from natural storms, which are only getting bigger, and larger boats on our lakes all the time, So once those waves hit the bare shoreline and they start slumping it off, you really got to have some sort of protection to break that wave energy up and stop that erosion from happening. So if you've got a lot of active erosion, I'd say call some advice in. But you can even still start by just planting some shrubs, get some deeper roots in there, trees and shrubs. And, a lot of people, I think, like that clear view of the lake, but you can really frame it. You can certainly do a good job of planting your trees strategically so that you have a nice frame view to the lake and it doesn't have to be just lawn.
Talking about erosion, you brought up some questions that I didn't write down actually, but I'm curious. I asked Paul Radomski when he was here about riprap, and I will ask you that as well. Is that a good process to do, to bring somebody in the winter over the ice and put rocks down on your shore to stop erosion or to slow it down?
Yep. So I think it depends on the situation and the severity of the erosion. I think there's a lot of natural products out there now that we can use that isn't that real hard armored manicured look. A lot of the lakes up here are naturally rocky, and so even if you can kind of strategically move some rocks around that are naturally occurring on your shoreline, that's a lot better than hauling in. But again, it depends on the situation and how severe the erosion is. I don't know if Paul had mentioned to you, there's some fish that actually like the rock, and so, I wouldn't advocate to somebody to put a lot of rock in, because certainly if you use natural stuff, you could plant some more plants, which buffers and filters the runoff. With rock, it does stop the erosion, but there's no roots or plants there to actually filter what's coming off your yard. So
I noticed that on our property we have ice ridges that change a bit from year to year.
Yep.
Should we just leave that alone?
I would, yes. So I've been to a few properties, only maybe one or two in my career, that I can actually see those historic ice ridges that have happened. If I stand back to the old cabin and it's never been leveled, and those are just so neat to look at, because that's the lake's natural process of creating a berm and not allowing that runoff to come in. So I'd say, and they do move around, they move from year to year, as you said, and so find some shrubs that you can put on there. I've done red osier dogwood on a property down in Brainerd area, and they would get completely tipped up in the winter, and then in the spring thaw, they come right back up, and they survive year after year after year. And so it's just a matter of trying to plant them and understand they're going to move, but that's the lake's natural process to keep runoff out of it. So
just as a little frosting on the cake, isn't it accurate that the inner bark of red osier dogwood is a aspirin?
Mm-hmm. Yes. You chew on that.
That's just kind of cool.
I know.
There are a lot of other things that we've learned about plants. Just a personal story. I remind everybody we're talking with Heather Baird from the Brainerd DNR office. obviously about shorelines.
Yep.
So we're going to get down into the weeds here in a second, although Paul didn't like it when I called
them weeds?
aquatic plants weeds. Yeah, it was just something that popped out. On our property, we sit maybe 60, 70 feet above the water. We first moved there 11 or 12 years ago. The previous owners had put in a little sand beach, and there was a lawn at the bottom of the hill that ran into the water, and we said, oh, this is swell.
Yeah.
So as soon as we owned it, we invited all my family up from around the world. And
there you go.
yeah, 18 people came from upstate New York and Georgia and Florida. And we had a great time until my son was digging in the sand beach. He said, well, it's full of ticks in here. And he's a wildlife biologist by training, so he kind of knew what he was looking at. So anyway, long story short, after a couple, 3 years of me rototilling the beach, my wife, who's sitting over there, decided that we really needed to just let it grow in, as you said. So a whole bunch of naturally occurring native plants that were very pretty to look at grew there. We augmented that with a few native plants that we purchased and put in that are growing great. But the neatest story to me was a year before last when a friend of mine from Florida came up, and he's into meditation and yoga. He went down to our shoreline and every morning and meditated and did yoga, surrounded by butterflies.
Wow.
And it was just an awesome, awesome thing. So as you said, stop mowing. It's not a difficult thing to do.
Right.
But if you had to decide what plants that you wanted to put down there, and or you wanted to, it's fun. To go out. We kind of noticed there aren't a lot of places locally that carry native plants. So I'm wondering if you could go into some detail, get down in the weeds, and talk about what kind of plants are good in general. Where would people find them? Where would they find somebody to ask about them? It really ain't easy.
Yeah, no, it's not easy. And that's been a struggle. I thought it would have gotten easier in my 20-year career. I thought, people will catch on to this and more people will start growing native plants, but that really hasn't been the case, unfortunately. So, I would say if you are a do-it-yourself gardener, Restore Your Shore. Again, if you Google Restore Your Shore, there's a native plant encyclopedia on there. And that's a great way to search. You can actually click on Itasca County and you can put in your growing conditions, full sun, part shade, moist, dry, and it will pop up a native plant list for your area. And then you can pick and choose. You can actually click on them and save your own list, so you're not saving the entire list. And then you could actually take that list to a native plant grower. So there are a few. I would ask a local nursery around here to see if anybody knows or if anybody's growing. I'm not that familiar with Itasca County. I do know a couple of the big ones in the state are Minnesota Native Landscapes, and they've been coming to the Brainerd area. I'm assuming they would come as far north as Grand Rapids, but they have an excellent growing yard and nursery, and they're doing a lot of great native plants for all over the state.
Is that a business?
It's a business, yep. Okay. Minnesota Native Landscapes. And then Prairie Restorations also does a great job. They've been in it for years, 25 or more, and you can certainly find both of those folks on the web. And again, I know they actually have a garden center in Cloquet, so they have a Prairie Restorations northern unit. Then they grow kind of more of the northern plants. There's some mom and pop ones, like Sunshine Gardens is in Pine Rivers, and she's been growing native plants for years.
Bonnie the plant lady.
Bonnie the plant lady, yep, and she is on KXC, I know, once in a while, and so so she's been doing a fantastic job. And there's probably others I'm missing, so I apologize for that, but I'd say ask around. Ask at your I went this morning to the farmers market in Brainerd, and there was trillium and tall meadow rue and some other things there, and so people. Ask around local places, and people may know, they may even just have some plants they've dug because they've got too many, so, but certainly those are good resources to start. And then if you're really I don't garden, I don't understand any of it, I just want it done, you can call some of the bigger plant places like Prairie Restorations, Minnesota Native Landscapes, and a few others and just say, can you come give me a bid to restore my shoreline? And 9 out of 10 times those people do a great job, and they'll use natural products. They'll tell you really if you need rock. They're not just going to put riprap in. And they're really the experts in the top of their field. Sunshine Gardens does some of that too. I don't know how far she travels, but so there's people out there doing it, not that many, like you said, unfortunately.
The cost of getting an estimate.
Yep.
So you call Prairie Restoration, for
Yep.
instance, which is quite well known up here. And they come out and they say, well, here's what we recommend. I mean, first of all, you should have done your research
Right.
on the plants through Restore Your Shore.
Yep.
And then when you have that list, you can compare it with what the professional says. Is there a charge for that estimate?
You know, I don't know. I'd have to have you call them. It
Okay.
used to be that a lot of them rolled that service in, like they'd come up and give you a plan for free, just kind of rolling it into the cost of business. I know Sunshine Gardens charges because, you know, she's a small business and she travels, you know,
Right.
from Pine River. It's I don't know exactly how much she charges for a plan, but yeah, that's a good thing. When you call, you should say, are you going, you know, what is the cost of a plan, or what is the cost to have someone come up here? I even know some of the soil and water conservation districts several years ago were charging because it's their staff time coming out
Right.
and doing a plan. So anyone you call, you should ask that right up front. That's a good point.
So the local soil and water office too is a good
Yep.
resource
Oh,
for
it's excellent. Yes.
everything we're talking
Yep.
about.
Yep.
Right. And there is that in Grand Rapids, of
Yep,
course.
and I know, you know, several of them even during their tree sales have been trying to incorporate more of the native plant sales in there too. So I don't know about Itasca County, but I know Crow Wing County, they have a limited number of native plants for sale.
So let's talk about money, because that's always
Yep.
a concern for people. Concern for retired people who may have moved up here, and for homeowners of all stripes. This is a tough answer to
Yep.
give, not a tough question. But can, you know, on a typical lot that's maybe 150 feet lakeshore, 100 feet lakeshore, whatever the, you know, the local rules are for that kind of thing, and all, what might it cost roughly, hundreds of dollars,
Sure.
thousands of dollars, to remedy the situation and just put in a buffer?
Yep, yeah, like you said, that's a tough question. So it really depends on the severity of the erosion, obviously. The one that I'm most familiar with, we're doing currently now, actually has a lot of nice native vegetation, but it does have some spots where a boat dock's been going in and out. There's some severe erosion. And then some areas, you know, where the kids like running up and down the bank and are causing some erosion. And that one, I think on that 100-foot lot with some trees and shrubs and kind of just adding to the native stuff and repairing what's broken, it's about $7,000. And that's fully installation. So that's like a contractor coming out, they did the plan, they're doing the full install, and 3 years of maintenance, which is really important. You know, if like you had a lot like you said, where you just stopped mowing and then you were going to just mitigate because, well, I got some great sedges and grasses, but there's not a lot of stuff blooming down there, you know, it could be $100 to mitigate a situation like that. You buy a couple trays of plants and you put them in, you're good to go.
That's exactly what we did.
Yeah. So, you know, so it really depends on the situation, but I'd say, you know, if you have lawn to the water's edge and you really need to do a full blowout, you know, someone planting, it's probably $5,000 to $7,000 to get that done, which
So
is
it
a
goes
lot of money.
from zero, actually less than zero, because you save gas in your mower,
Right?
to 100 or two, depending how many plants you want to buy,
Yep.
to the full-blown $7,000 would be the
Yep.
most. So let's say you needed to, or you wanted to go full-blown and spend $7,000. Are there grants or financing, those kinds of things available?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I know a lot of the soil and water conservation districts have been getting clean water funds. Some of them actually have been working with lake associations and other lake groups to do some other funding sources through clean water to try to get this done. So yeah, so I think there is money available, and it depends from area to area, you know. And you may have a lake association that said, let's pilot one. We'll chip in $2,000 from our lake association funds this year and match your $2,000 or something and see what we can get done. And so I think, you know, certainly search out every avenue you can. The other option too is, you know, if you took 100 foot of lakeshore and you said, I want to do the whole thing, that's a little overwhelming to a landowner, you know. So I always suggested to people to do it in pieces. And I know a couple landowners down by Brainerd who have done that. You know, they've done kind of 30-foot chunks, installed it, maintained it, and then a few years later said, okay, now I'm going to install the next chunk, you know, and kind of either working in from the edges and leaving an area for your dock and beach or whatever, and not being overwhelmed by the price tag and the amount of work to maintain it. So,
Well, it's interesting, in our example, which is kind of a neat one to use, I think, it didn't even take a summer
Yeah.
to have plants come up. I mean, you know, there
Yep.
they were.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of cool, including
Yep.
milkweed, so monarchs
Right.
were down there and all that. Well, we're done.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was fast.
That goes quick. I would urge to pick up this around Grand Rapids. It's a great resource and is specific to Itasca County. Restore Your Shore, which is at the mndnr.org, or just type Google Restore Your Shore. ItascaWaters.org will link you to that and other resources that are native to Itasca County. So it's a great project to be involved in this year on your shore. Heather, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's nice to see
Glad
you.
to
Nice
be
to
in
talk
Grand
to you.
Rapids today.
Yeah, it's a great day. So my guest has been Heather Baird, who is a Forest Fisheries Landscape Coordinator for the DNR. If you would like more information about Itasca County shorelands, how to keep your shoreland healthy and maintain or grow your property's value, you can go to our website, itascawaters.org. The site has tons of useful links to all kinds of resources, and it is quite simple to navigate. Our next program in this series will focus on runoff and erosion issues. Check your ICTV listings for when that program will air. You can watch each of our 6 programs in this series on our website, itascawaters.org. Look under Special Resources on the homepage. Just click on Itasca Waters, the TV shows. I'm Brian Whittemore. Thanks for watching Itasca Waters.